They mocked a mom with a baby. Then the CEO walked in to kiss her with the baby and said, "Hi, honey. Would you ever judge someone without knowing their story? If not, then this video will move your heart. Our story begins in a busy coffee shop where a caramel-skinned American woman stands with her baby in a sling, just trying to order a warm drink. She doesn't wear designer clothes. Her hair is tied in a messy bun. She looks tired. The people behind her start to whisper, laugh, judge. But a moment later, someone walks in. Not just anyone. The man who owns half the city. The CEO that business blogs call untouchable. And to everyone's surprise, he walks straight to her, kisses her forehead gently, then kisses the baby and says, "Hi, honey. Sorry I'm late. Welcome back to the channel, my beautiful story family. Before we begin, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop your location in the comments. I see you, I appreciate you, and I thank you for being part of this growing community. And if you believe in kindness and not cruelty, kindly hit the subscribe button. Now, let us begin." The coffee shop hummed with the clatter of cups and the low murmur of conversation, a sleek upscale spot where the city's elite sipped overpriced lattes. Raina stood at the counter, her baby nestled against her chest in a worn sling, the faint scent of milk and lavender clinging to her. Her caramel skin glowed under the soft lighting, but her eyes were heavy with exhaustion, her dark hair pulled into a messy bun that spoke of sleepless nights. She fumbled with her wallet, trying to count out exact change for a small black coffee, her fingers trembling slightly as she felt the weight of eyes on her. Behind her, a group of women in tailored blazers and glossy heels exchanged glances, their lips curling into smirks. The leader, Delilah, leaned toward her friends, her voice just loud enough to carry. "Look at her. Bet she's lost. This isn't the discount diner, sweetheart." Her friends snickered, one of them flipping her sleek blonde hair as she added, "Seriously, who brings a baby in here? It's not a daycare." The words stung, sharp and deliberate, slicing through the air as Raina's shoulders tensed. She kept her gaze fixed on the barista, who avoided her eyes, pretending to be engrossed in wiping down the counter. Raina's voice was soft but steady as she spoke to the barista. "Just a small coffee, please. Black." The baby stirred against her, letting out a small whimper, and Raina instinctively rocked her weight from one foot to the other, soothing him. Her sneakers were scuffed, her sweater slightly frayed at the cuffs. Not the polished aesthetic of the coffee shop's usual crowd. Another customer, a man in a crisp suit, muttered under his breath about the line moving too slowly, his impatience like a drumbeat in the tense air. Delilah's voice grew bolder, her words dripping with mockery. "What's she even doing here? Look at that sling. Probably got it from a thrift store. And that baby. Does she think this is a playground?" Her friend, a woman with sharp red nails, laughed. "Maybe she's hoping for a handout. You know how some people are." The group's laughter swelled, a cruel chorus that made Raina's cheeks burn. She wanted to turn, to say something, anything, but the weight of her son against her chest anchored her. She wouldn't give them the satisfaction of seeing her break. The barista finally slid the coffee across the counter, her voice flat. $3.75. Raina handed over the exact change she'd counted out, her fingers brushing the coins as if they were precious. She reached for the cup, but her hand shook slightly, and the hot liquid sloshed, nearly spilling. Delilah seized the moment, her voice cutting through the noise. "Oh, great! Now she's going to make a mess too. Can someone get her out of here?" The words landed like a slap, and for a moment, Raina froze, her breath catching in her throat. Then the door swung open, the bell above it chiming sharply. The air in the coffee shop shifted, a subtle change that made heads turn. Footsteps, deliberate and unhurried, echoed on the polished floor. Raina didn't look up at first, too focused on steadying her coffee and her nerves. But the whispers stopped, replaced by a stunned silence that seemed to suck the oxygen from the room. A man approached, his presence commanding without effort. He was tall, his dark suit tailored to perfection, his jawline sharp enough to cut glass. His eyes, a piercing gray, scanned the room briefly before locking onto Raina. The crowd parted instinctively as he moved, their curiosity palpable but unspoken. This was Maddox Kane, the CEO whose name adorned skyscrapers and business headlines, a man whose wealth and influence made him untouchable. Blogs called him a visionary, tabloids called him a mystery. No one expected him here, in a coffee shop at 10 a.m. on a Tuesday. He stopped beside Raina, his gaze softening as he looked at her. Without a word, he leaned down and pressed a gentle kiss to her forehead, his hand brushing the baby's tiny head in the sling. The baby cooed, and Maddox's lips curved into a smile that was both tender and private. "Hi, honey," he said, his voice low and warm, carrying just enough for the room to hear. "Sorry I'm late." The coffee shop went still, as if time itself had paused. Delilah's mouth hung open, her friend's smirks vanishing like smoke. The man in the suit dropped his phone mid-text, staring. The barista's hand froze on the espresso machine, steam hissing into the silence. Raina looked up at Maddox, her eyes flickering with a mix of relief and something deeper, something unspoken. She didn't say anything, but her fingers tightened around the coffee cup, grounding herself. Maddox turned slightly, his gaze sweeping the room, not accusing but sharp enough to make the onlookers flinch. He didn't need to speak. His presence was statement enough. Delilah shrank back, her confidence crumbling under the weight of his stare. Her friends busied themselves with their phones, suddenly fascinated by their screens. The man in the suit coughed awkwardly and stepped out of line, mumbling about a meeting. Raina's voice broke the silence, quiet but firm. "You didn't have to come?" She adjusted the sling, her eyes searching his face. "I was fine." Maddox's smile was small, almost teasing. "You're always fine. Doesn't mean I can't show up." He reached for the coffee cup in her hand, his fingers brushing hers. "Let me hold this. You've got enough going on." He nodded toward the baby, who was now gurgling happily, oblivious to the tension. Raina hesitated, then let him take the cup. "You're impossible," she said, but there was warmth in her voice, a familiarity that hinted at a deeper bond. She glanced around, catching the stunned faces, and her lips pressed into a thin line. "They're all staring." "Let them," Maddox said, his tone dismissive but not cruel. He leaned closer, lowering his voice so only she could hear. "They don't know you. They don't know us." His words carried a weight, a promise, but also a question, one that lingered in the air between them. The moment stretched, heavy with unspoken history. Who was Raina to Maddox Kane? The question buzzed in the minds of everyone watching, their curiosity now tinged with envy and confusion. Delilah, recovering slightly, whispered to her friend, "No way. She's nobody. This has to be a stunt." But her voice lacked conviction, and her friend didn't respond, too busy stealing glances at Maddox. Raina shifted her weight, her exhaustion creeping back. "I just wanted a coffee," she said, almost to herself. "Not this." She gestured vaguely at the room, at the eyes still fixed on them. Maddox's expression softened further, but there was a flicker of something else, concern, maybe, or determination. "You shouldn't have to deal with this," he said. "Not here, not anywhere." He paused, then added, "Come on, let's get out of here. I've got the car outside." Raina looked at him, her eyes searching his for a moment longer than necessary. There was a story there, one the coffee shop crowd could only guess at. She nodded slowly, adjusting the sling. "Okay, but only because I'm too tired to argue with you." He chuckled, a low sound that seemed to ease the tension in her shoulders. "That's my girl." He placed a hand lightly on her back, guiding her toward the door. The crowd parted again, their whispers starting up as soon as Maddox and Raina stepped outside. The bell chimed, and the door swung shut, leaving the coffee shop in a state of stunned chaos. Outside, the city buzzed, cars honking, pedestrians rushing past. Maddox's black SUV waited at the curb, its driver standing respectfully by the door. Raina hesitated, glancing at the vehicle, then back at Maddox. "You didn't have to make a scene," she said, her voice quieter now, almost vulnerable. "I could have handled it." "I know you could have," he said, opening the car door for her. "But you shouldn't have to. Not when I'm here." His words were simple, but they carried a weight that made her pause. She slid into the car, cradling the baby, and Maddox followed, the door closing with a soft thud. Inside the coffee shop, Delilah and her friends huddled at their table, their voices low but frantic. "Who is she?" Delilah demanded, her earlier confidence replaced by a mix of jealousy and disbelief. "There's no way she's with him. Maddox Kane doesn't date—" "What, single moms?" She looked like she hadn't slept in a week. Her friend, the one with red nails, scrolled furiously on her phone. "I'm looking him up. There's nothing about a girlfriend. Nothing. He's always alone at events. This doesn't add up." The barista, now eavesdropping, leaned closer. "I heard he's private, like really private. Maybe she's not just some random woman." Her voice was hushed, as if speaking too loudly might summon Maddox back. Delilah's eyes narrowed. "Private or not, I'm finding out who she is. Nobody just walks into Maddox Kane's life like that." Her words were bold, but her hands trembled slightly as she sipped her latte, betraying her unease. The man in the suit, now back in line, muttered to no one in particular. "That's the kind of thing you don't see every day. Makes you wonder what else we don't know about him." The coffee shop buzzed with speculation, each customer weaving their own version of the story. Was Raina a secret wife? A mistress? A charity case? The questions hung in the air unanswered as the city moved on outside. But one thing was clear. Raina wasn't just the tired mom they'd mocked. And Maddox Kane, the untouchable CEO, had just shown the world a side of himself no one had seen before. The story didn't end there. It was only beginning. What had brought Raina and Maddox together? Why had he kept her a secret? And what would happen when the city's gossip machine started digging into their lives? The answers were out there, waiting, but for now the coffee shop was left with nothing but questions, and the faint scent of Raina's lavender perfume lingering in the air. Have you ever seen someone judged unfairly? Let's talk about it in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you believe everyone deserves respect. The black SUV glided through the city, its tinted windows shielding Raina and Maddox from the curious stares of pedestrians. Inside, the hum of the engine was a soft backdrop to the quiet between them. Raina cradled her baby, now asleep in the sling, his tiny breaths steady against her chest. She stared out the window, the coffee shop's cruelty still stinging, though Maddox's presence had dulled the sharpest edges. His hand rested on the seat, close but not touching, as if giving her space to process. "You didn't have to do that," Raina said again, her voice low, almost lost in the sound of the city outside. "Make a scene. I'm used to people like them." Maddox's jaw tightened, but his tone stayed gentle. "You shouldn't have to be." He glanced at her, his gray eyes searching. "I hate that you were standing there, taking their garbage, and I wasn't there sooner." She met his gaze, her exhaustion giving way to a flicker of defiance. "I've been handling worse than a few snobs my whole life. I don't need a knight in shining armor." Her words were sharp, but there was a softness beneath them, a gratitude she wasn't ready to voice. He smiled, just a hint, the kind that made her heart stutter despite herself. "Noted. But I'm not going anywhere, Raina. Not unless you tell me to." The car slowed at a stoplight and the silence stretched, heavy with unspoken questions. Who were they to each other? Why had Maddox, a man who could have anyone, chosen to stand by her in that coffee shop? The answers felt close, yet just out of reach, like a memory she couldn't quite grasp. Weeks later, Raina's world tilted on its axis. She sat on the worn couch in her small apartment, the baby asleep in a crib nearby. Her phone glowed in her hand, a news article open on the screen. The headline screamed, Maddox Kane, billionaire CEO, spotted in coffee shop with mystery woman. Below it, a grainy photo captured the moment he'd kissed her forehead, the baby nestled between them. The article was sparse on details but lavish with speculation, calling her an unknown woman and hinting at a scandal. Raina's stomach churned as she scrolled, each word hammering home a truth she hadn't known. Maddox wasn't just a kind man who'd helped her clean up spilled coffee at an art gallery. He was a titan, a name that commanded boardrooms and headlines. Her mind flashed back to that night, months ago, at the painting exhibition. She'd been a temp worker, serving drinks to wealthy patrons, her nerves frayed from juggling motherhood and bills. She'd tripped, splashing coffee on a man's pristine shirt. Expecting anger, she'd braced herself, but he'd only laughed, grabbing napkins to help her. "No harm done," he'd said, his voice warm, his eyes crinkling at the corners. They'd talked for hours after about art, life, dreams, hers to open a community center, his vague mentions of work. They even made love, but it was just a one-time thing. He'd never hinted at who he was, not once. Now the betrayal cut deep. Raina tossed the phone onto the couch, her hands shaking. He'd known. Every late-night call, every quiet moment they'd stolen together. He'd known he was hiding a truth that could change everything. She felt like a fool, a single mom who'd let herself believe in something real, only to find it built on a lie. The doorbell rang, sharp and insistent. She knew it was him before she opened the door. Maddox stood there, his usual confidence tempered by something else. Worry, maybe guilt. He held a small bouquet of daisies, her favorite, but his eyes searched hers, bracing for impact. "You're him," Raina said, her voice cold, the words slicing the air. "Maddox Kane, the CEO, the billionaire. You lied to me." He didn't flinch, but his shoulders sagged slightly. "I didn't lie, Raina. I just didn't tell you everything." "That's the same thing." Her voice rose, and she stepped back, keeping the door half closed, a barrier between them. "You let me think you were just some guy, someone normal. Do you know how stupid I feel? The whole city's talking about us, and I didn't even know who I was standing next to." Maddox set the daisies on the ground, his hands raised as if to calm her. "I wanted you to know me first, the real me. Not the name, not the money, not the headlines. The world twists everything, Raina. I've seen it ruin people. I didn't want it to ruin us." "Us?" She laughed, bitter and sharp. "What us? You played me. You let me think." She stopped, her throat tightening. She wouldn't cry, not in front of him. "You should have told me. The first night, the first call. Any time I let you into my life." He took a step closer, his voice low, urgent. "I wanted to. Every time we talked, I was this close to saying it. But then you'd laugh, or you'd tell me about your day, and I'd think, she's seeing me. Not the CEO, just me. I haven't had that in years." Raina's chest ached, torn between his words and the sting of his secrecy. "You don't get to decide what I can handle. You don't get to hide half your life and call it protecting me." "I know," he said, his voice breaking slightly. "I messed up, but I'm here now telling you everything. Ask me anything, Raina. I'll answer." She stared at him, his gray eyes pleading, his hands open at his sides. Part of her wanted to slam the door to shut him out and protect herself from the chaos his world would bring. But another part, the part that remembered his gentle touch, his quiet laughter, hesitated. "Why me?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "You could have anyone. Why a broke single mom who can't even afford a decent coffee?" Maddox's expression softened, but before he could answer, she shook her head. "Don't. I can't do this. Not now." She stepped back, her hand on the door. "I need time, away from you." "Raina, please," he started, but she closed the door, the click echoing in the silence. She leaned against it, her breath ragged, tears finally spilling over. Outside, she heard his footsteps linger, then fade. The next morning, Raina was gone. Her apartment was empty, the crib packed, her phone disconnected. Maddox stood in the doorway, the daisies still wilting on the ground, his calls unanswered. The city buzzed with rumors, but Raina had vanished, leaving only questions in her wake. Where had she gone? And what would Maddox do to find her? The echo of Raina's door closing lingered in Maddox's mind as he stood outside her empty apartment, the wilted daisies at his feet, a silent accusation. He'd waited too long, hidden too much, and now she was gone. His calls went straight to voicemail, her number disconnected by morning. The city's gossip churned, tabloids speculating about the mystery woman who'd vanished, but Maddox felt only the weight of his own failure. He traced her steps in his mind, the coffee shop, the art gallery, the late-night talks where she'd let him in, piece by piece. Now she'd shut him out, and he didn't know where to begin looking. He returned to his penthouse, the skyline glittering beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows, but it felt hollow. Her lavender scent still clung to a scarf she'd left behind, and he held it, his jaw tight. "I'll find you," he whispered, though the words felt futile. Raina wasn't just hiding from him, she was hiding from his world, the one he'd shielded her from until it was too late. Weeks later, Raina sat on a creaky bed in a small, unfamiliar apartment, far from the city's clamor. She'd taken a bus to a quiet coastal town where the air smelled of salt and the streets were lined with weathered shops. Her baby, Jonah, slept in a second-hand crib, his tiny chest rising and falling. The apartment was sparse, a thrift store couch, a single lamp, but it was hers, paid for with the last of her savings. She'd left to escape the spotlight, the judgment, and the man who'd made her believe in something only to break her trust. Her hand rested on her stomach, a faint nausea lingering. At first, she'd chalked it up to stress, the move, the heartbreak, the weight of starting over. But the signs were unmistakable, missed cycles, fatigue that went beyond sleepless nights with Jonah. She'd bought a pregnancy test at a corner store, her hands shaking as she paid. Now the plastic stick sat on the bathroom counter, two pink lines staring back at her like a verdict. Raina's breath caught, her heart a tangle of fear and wonder. Another baby. Maddox's baby. The thought of him sent a pang through her, his gentle kisses, his quiet promises, his lies by omission. She wanted to hate him, but the memory of his voice, low and earnest, wouldn't let her. "I wanted you to know me," he'd said, and she had, or thought she had, until the world showed her who he really was. She reached for her phone, a cheap burner she'd bought to stay off the grid. Her thumb hovered over his number, the only one she'd memorized. She needed to tell him, didn't she? He deserved to know, even if she wasn't ready to forgive. But when she dialed, the call didn't connect, just a cold, automated voice. "The number you have reached is temporarily unavailable." She tried again, then again, her frustration mounting. Nothing. Unknown to Raina, Maddox was in a business blackout, a high-stakes deal requiring total isolation. His company was acquiring a rival firm, and he'd been sequestered in a secure facility with no phones, no internet, no contact with the outside world. His team had orders, no interruptions, not even for emergencies. It was the kind of move that made him untouchable, but it also made him unreachable, a ghost when Reyna needed him most. She set the phone down, her hands trembling. The silence of the apartment pressed in, broken only by Jonah's soft snores. Reyna's mind raced. She could wait, keep trying to reach him. But what then? Would he swoop in with his wealth and promises, pulling her into a world she'd already fled? Or worse, would he doubt her, question the baby's paternity, turn cold like the men in her past? The thought made her chest ache, a wound she couldn't afford to reopen. She stood, pacing the small room, her reflection flickering in a cracked mirror. "I can do this," she whispered, her voice unsteady but resolute. She'd raised Jonah alone, hadn't she? Through sleepless nights and empty bank accounts, she'd kept him safe, loved, fed. She could do it again. She had to. Maddox's world was too big, too chaotic, too full of eyes that judged and voices that mocked. Her children deserved better. A quiet life, a mother who wouldn't break. Reyna made her choice. She deleted his number, her finger lingering on the screen before letting go. She'd raised Jonah and this new baby alone, in this small town where no one knew her name. No headlines, no coffee shop sneers, no billionaire secrets. Just her and her children, building a life from scratch. But as she tucked Jonah's blanket around him, a question gnawed at her. What if Maddox found her? He wasn't the kind of man to give up, not when he'd looked at her like she was his entire world. And what if the city's gossip machine tracked her down, dragging her back into the spotlight? The pregnancy test lay on the counter, a secret that could change everything. If anyone discovered it. Outside, the ocean whispered against the shore, and Reyna sat in the dark, her hand on her stomach. She was alone, but not for long. The future was coming, whether she was ready or not, and it carried questions she couldn't yet answer. The coastal town had become Reyna's sanctuary, its quiet streets and salty air a balm for the wounds she carried. She'd settled into a rhythm, working odd jobs, tending to Jonah, and nurturing the new life growing inside her. The pregnancy test's 2 pink lines had reshaped her world, and when her second son, Eli, was born, she held him close, vowing to protect him from the chaos she'd left behind. Maddox's number was gone, his voice a memory she buried deep. She tried to reach him, but his silence had been her answer. Now it was just her, Jonah, and Eli, a small family carved out of resilience and love. But the past has a way of finding you. A year later, Reyna stood in a bustling banquet hall, her black uniform crisp but plain, her hair neatly braided. She'd taken a job serving at a charity gala in the city, a rare trip back to the place she'd fled. The pay was too good to pass up, and with 2 children, every dollar counted. The gala was a glittering affair, crystal chandeliers, tuxedos, gowns that cost more than her rent. She moved through the crowd, balancing a tray of champagne flutes, her eyes scanning for spilled drinks or empty glasses. Jonah and Eli were with a trusted neighbor, safe, but her heart tugged at the thought of them. She didn't see him at first. Maddox stood across the room, his presence as commanding as ever, though his face was drawn, shadows under his gray eyes. The business blackout had ended months ago, but Reyna's disappearance had left a void he couldn't fill. He'd searched for her, hired investigators, combed through records, but she'd vanished like smoke. Now he was here, shaking hands, smiling for photos, playing the part of the untouchable CEO. But his gaze wandered, restless, until it landed on her. Reyna froze mid-step, a champagne flute wobbling on her tray. Maddox was here. Her pulse raced, the noise of the gala fading to a dull roar. He looked the same, sharp suit, broad shoulders, but there was a weariness in him, a crack in his polished exterior. Their eyes met, and for a moment, the world stopped. His shock was palpable, his lips parting as if to speak, but no words came. She turned away, her breath shallow, and busied herself with a guest, offering a drink with a forced smile. Her mind screamed to run, to slip out the back and disappear again, but her feet stayed rooted. She couldn't afford to lose this job, not with two boys depending on her. She felt his gaze burning into her, tracking her every move. Maddox crossed the room, weaving through the crowd with purpose. Guests tried to stop him, hands outstretched, voices eager, but he brushed them off, his focus singular. Raina sensed him approaching, her hands trembling as she set down her tray. She turned, and there he was, close enough to touch, his scent, cedar and something warm, stirring memories she'd fought to forget. "Raina," he said, his voice low, raw. It wasn't a question but a plea, as if saying her name might keep her from vanishing again. She lifted her chin, her voice steady despite the storm inside. "I'm working, Maddox. I don't have time for this." She moved to step past him, but he blocked her path, not aggressive but desperate. "Please," he said, "just talk to me." "You left. No note, no trace. I thought—" He stopped, his jaw tight. "I thought you were gone for good." Her eyes flashed, old hurt rising. "I tried to reach you for weeks. You were gone, Maddox, unreachable, so I did what I had to do." Her words were sharp, but her voice cracked, betraying the pain she'd carried. He flinched, guilt etching his features. "The blackout. It was a deal. I couldn't—" He shook his head. "I didn't know you were trying. If I had, I'd have torn the world apart to get to you." She wanted to believe him, but trust was a fragile thing, and he'd broken hers. "It doesn't matter now," she said, turning away. "I've moved on." Before he could respond, a co-worker approached, holding Eli. "Raina, your neighbor dropped him off, said he was fussy." Eli, 6 months old, squirmed in the woman's arms, his dark eyes wide. Raina took him, her movements automatic, soothing him with a gentle sway. "Thanks, Lila," she murmured, her focus on her son. Maddox stared, his breath catching. Eli's caramel skin, his tiny curls. They mirrored Jonah's, but there was something else, a familiarity that hit him like a punch. He stepped closer, his voice barely a whisper. "Raina, is he mine?" The question hung between them, heavy with a year of secrets. Raina's arms tightened around Eli, her heart pounding. She could lie, say he wasn't, send Maddox back to his world and keep hers safe. But his eyes, pleading, vulnerable, held her. She'd run from him once, but here he was, standing in her path, asking for a truth she wasn't ready to give. "Maddox, she started, but a guest called for her and the moment broke. She stepped back, Eli against her chest, her voice firm. "I have to work. Please, just go." He didn't move, his gaze locked on Eli, then her. "I'm not leaving, Raina. Not this time." His words were a promise, one that sent a shiver through her. The gala swirled around them, oblivious to the collision of their worlds, but for Raina and Maddox, the stakes had never been higher. What would she tell him? And what would he do when he knew the truth? The gala's glittering chaos swirled around Raina, the clink of glasses and murmur of laughter, a stark contrast to the weight of Maddox's question. "Is he mine?" She held Eli close, his warmth grounding her as she faced the man she'd once trusted, then fled. Maddox stood inches away, his gray eyes fixed on her, pleading for an answer. The vulnerability in his expression was new, a crack in the untouchable CEO she'd seen in headlines. She'd told him to go, but he hadn't moved, his words, "I'm not leaving," echoing in her mind. The crowd pressed in, oblivious, but for Raina, the room had narrowed to just them. She adjusted Eli, her voice low to keep from drawing eyes. "Maddox, this isn't the place. I'm working. I can't do this now." Her tone was firm, but her hands trembled, betraying the storm inside. She wanted to run again, to shield her sons from his world, but his presence was a tether she couldn't break. Please, Raina, he said, his voice raw, barely above a whisper. I've spent a year looking for you. I won't walk away without knowing. He glanced at Eli, his expression softening, a mix of awe and fear. He looks like you, but there's something else. I need to know. A guest brushed past, nearly knocking her tray, and Raina steadied it, her resolve hardening. Meet me after my shift, she said, her words clipped. Outside by the service entrance. We'll talk then. It was a concession, but not a surrender. She needed time to think, to decide how much of her truth to give. Maddox nodded, relief flickering in his eyes. I'll be there. He stepped back, letting her slip into the crowd, but she felt his gaze follow her, a weight she couldn't shake. Hours later, the gala's glow had faded, the banquet hall emptying into the cool night. Raina stood by the service entrance, Eli asleep in a sling against her chest, Jonah with her neighbor for the night. Her uniform was wrinkled, her braid fraying, but she stood tall, steeling herself. Maddox emerged from the shadows, his suit still pristine but his face etched with tension. The city hummed around them, distant horns, the rustle of leaves, but here it was just them, the air thick with a year of unspoken words. Raina didn't wait for him to speak. His name is Eli, she said, her voice steady but quiet. He's 6 months old, and yes, he's yours. The truth landed like a stone, heavy and final. She watched Maddox's face, waiting for doubt, denial, anything to confirm her fears. He exhaled, a sound caught between shock and wonder. His eyes dropped to Eli, who stirred slightly, oblivious to the moment reshaping their lives. Mine, Maddox whispered, as if testing the word. He ran a hand through his hair, his composure cracking. Raina, I had no idea. Why didn't you tell me? Her laugh was sharp, bitter. I tried. When I found out I was pregnant, I called you. Over and over. Your phone was off. Your life was locked away in some deal. I was alone, Maddox. I had Jonah to think about, and then Eli. I couldn't wait for you to decide if you wanted us. His face fell, guilt carving deeper lines. The blackout. It was a mistake, Raina. If I'd known... He stopped, shaking his head. I'd have been there. For you. For him. He stepped closer, his voice earnest. I want to be involved. I want to know Eli and Jonah too. I want to be part of their lives. Your life. Raina's chest tightened, torn between his sincerity and her scars. She adjusted the sling, her arms protective around Eli. You say that now, but what does that mean? Your world isn't mine, Maddox. It's headlines and judgment, people like those in the coffee shop who look at me and see nothing. I won't let my boys grow up in that. I'd protect you, he said, his voice fierce but not loud. All of you. I'd keep the world out, make sure you're safe. I've spent a year regretting what I didn't say, what I didn't do. I won't lose you again. She studied him, his eyes pleading, his hands open as if offering everything. But trust was a fragile thing, and hers was still mending. You don't get it, she said, her voice softer now, laced with pain. It's not just about you wanting us. It's about me believing you won't disappear again, that you won't hide who you are or let your world swallow us. He nodded, absorbing her words. Then let me prove it. Start small. Let me meet Eli, spend time with him, with Jonah. No cameras, no headlines, just us. He paused, his voice dropping. I loved you, Raina. I still do. I'll wait as long as it takes. Her breath caught at the word loved, a wound and a warmth at once. She wanted to believe him, to let herself fall back into the man who'd cleaned up, spilled coffee, and kissed her forehead. But she'd built a life without him, for her sons, and letting him in risked everything. I don't know if I can, she said, her voice barely audible. I need time, to think, to see if you mean this. She stepped back, the distance between them growing. "I'll call you. When I'm ready." Maddox's jaw tightened, but he didn't push. "I'll be waiting," he said, his eyes on Eli, then her. "For as long as it takes." She turned, walking into the night, Eli's weight anchoring her. The city's lights blurred, her heart a tangle of hope and fear. Could she trust him? Would his world tear them apart? And what would happen if the truth about Eli reached the headlines? The questions followed her, unanswered, as the night swallowed her steps. Raina's footsteps echoed in the quiet night as she walked away from Maddox. Eli's soft breaths against her chest, a steady rhythm amidst the turmoil in her heart. Maddox's words, "I'll be waiting," lingered, a promise that both warmed and unnerved her. She'd laid bare the truth about Eli, and though his sincerity had shaken her, trust was a bridge she wasn't ready to cross. The city's lights flickered in the distance, a reminder of the world she'd fled, one that could so easily pull her back in. She tightened her grip on the sling, determined to protect her sons, no matter what Maddox offered. The next morning, Raina returned to her coastal town, the salty air a stark contrast to the city's clamor. Jonah toddled around their small apartment, his laughter a balm as she prepared for her shift at the local daycare. She'd taken the job after Eli's birth, grateful for the steady income and the chance to keep her boys close. But as she dropped Jonah off, her co-worker's sidelong glance and hushed whisper to another staff member set her on edge. Gossip traveled fast even here, and the gala had stirred something. She pushed it aside, focusing on the kids, but the unease clung to her. Meanwhile, in the city, Maddox sat in his penthouse office, the skyline sprawling beyond his desk. He hadn't slept, Raina's words replaying in his mind. "I need time." Eli's face, his son's face, haunted him, a reminder of what he'd missed and what he stood to lose. He'd meant every word about proving himself. But the world wasn't as easily controlled as he'd hoped. His phone buzzed, his assistant's voice cutting through. "Sir, there's a problem. Trent Holloway's been asking questions about the woman from the gala." Maddox's jaw tightened. Trent Holloway was no stranger, a rival CEO with a penchant for playing dirty. Their companies had clashed for years, but Trent's tactics had grown personal, especially after Maddox's latest acquisition had outmaneuvered him. If Trent had caught wind of Raina, she wasn't just a story, she was a weapon. Maddox stood, his voice sharp. "Find out what he knows, now." Unbeknownst to Maddox, Trent was already moving. In a sleek downtown office, he leaned back in his chair, a tablet in hand displaying the grainy gala photo of Raina and Maddox. His lips curled into a smirk as he spoke to his assistant. "This is perfect. Maddox Kane, the untouchable, has a weak spot. A single mom with 2 kids. The press will eat it up." He tapped the screen. "Dig into her. I want everything. Where she lives, what she does, who she talks to. If we play this right, we can ruin him." Back in the coastal town, Raina's day unraveled. At the daycare, her manager called her into a cramped office, her face tight with discomfort. "Raina, we need to talk. There's been chatter about you and some billionaire in the city. Parents are asking questions. They're worried about distractions." Raina's stomach dropped. "Chatter. I do my job. I'm here for the kids, same as always." Her voice was steady, but her hands clenched, the sting of judgment all too familiar. The manager sighed, avoiding her eyes. "I know, but it's out of my hands. We can't have this kind of attention. I'm sorry, but we have to let you go." The words landed like a blow, and Raina stood, her mind racing. She needed this job. Diapers, rent, formula didn't pay for themselves. As she gathered her things, she overheard a coworker whispering, "Heard she's after his money." Typical. The rumor had a source. Delilah, the woman from the coffee shop, now a socialite with a grudge. She'd been at the gala, her jealousy reignited by Maddox's devotion to Raina. Over cocktails with her circle, Delilah had spun a tale, her voice dripping with venom. She's nobody, trust me, a broke single mom latching onto Maddox Kane for his wallet. I saw her first, shabby clothes, baby in tow. She's playing him, and he's too smitten to see it. Her friends had spread the story, and now it was wildfire, fueled by blogs and social media, painting Raina as a gold digger. Raina felt the weight of it as she walked home, Jonah's hand in hers, Eli in the sling. The town, once a haven, now buzzed with whispers. A neighbor's curt nod, a shopkeeper's raised brow. Every glance felt like an accusation. She'd lost her job, her stability, and the rumors were only growing. Worse, she couldn't shake the fear that this was just the beginning. If Delilah's gossip had reached her small town, what else was coming? That night, Raina sat at her kitchen table, bills scattered across the surface. Jonah slept in the next room, Eli in her lap, his tiny fingers curled around hers. She stared at her phone, Maddox's number a ghost in her mind. She'd promised to call when she was ready, but pride and fear held her back. He'd said he'd protect her, but could he? Or would his world only bring more chaos? Her thoughts were interrupted by a knock at the door, sharp and unexpected. She hesitated, Eli stirring against her. The knock came again, insistent. Heart pounding, she opened the door to a man she didn't recognize. Tall, slick suit, eyes cold. He smiled, but it didn't reach his gaze. "Raina, right? I'm a friend of Maddox Kane's. We need to talk." Her grip on Eli tightened, instinct screaming danger. "I don't know you. What do you want?" Her voice was firm, but her pulse raced. The man, Trent Holloway, stepped closer, his tone smooth but laced with threat. "I know about you and Maddox. The kid, too. Cute story, but it's causing problems. For him, for his company." He leaned in, his voice dropping. "Walk away, Raina. Disappear again, or I'll make sure everyone knows exactly who you are and what you're after." Raina's blood ran cold. "Get out," she said, her voice low, fierce. "Now." Trent chuckled, unfazed. "Think about it. You don't want to be in my way." He turned, leaving a business card on the doorstep, his footsteps fading into the night. Raina slammed the door, her breath ragged. She clutched Eli, her mind spiraling. Not the word you hate, but a frantic whirl. Trent's threat wasn't idle. She'd seen men like him before, powerful and ruthless. He wanted to hurt Maddox, and she was the leverage. The rumors Delilah had started were bad enough, but this was different, calculated, dangerous. Losing her job was just the start. What would Trent do next? Expose Eli's paternity? Drag her sons into the spotlight? She sank onto the couch, Eli's warmth anchoring her. The bills loomed, her savings dwindling. She couldn't run again, not with 2 kids, not without money. But staying meant facing Trent's threat and the gossip that was tearing her life apart. Maddox's face flashed in her mind, his promise to protect her, his plea to let him in. She'd resisted, afraid of his world, but now that world was at her door, whether she wanted it or not. Her fingers hovered over her phone. Calling Maddox meant opening a door she'd fought to keep closed, risking her heart and her son's safety. But doing nothing meant letting Trent win, letting the rumors define her. She thought of Jonah's laughter, Eli's trusting eyes. They deserved a life free from this shadow, but could she fight it alone? The night stretched on, the ocean's whisper outside her window, a faint comfort. Raina didn't sleep, her mind wrestling with a choice that could change everything. Trent's card lay on the table, a ticking clock. If she called Maddox, what would he do? Could he stop Trent, or would his involvement make things worse? And what if Delilah's rumors grew louder, turning her into a villain in a story she hadn't written? The questions piled up, each one a weight. Raina looked at Eli, then at Jonah's toy truck on the floor. She'd built a life for them, scrap by scrap, but it was crumbling. The truth about Eli was out, at least to Maddox, and Trent's threat loomed large. The city's gossip, fueled by Delilah, was a blade at her back. She couldn't stay silent, but speaking meant stepping into the fire. She picked up the phone, her thumb trembling. The call would change everything. Her life, her son's, Maddox's. But as the screen glowed, she hesitated, the weight of her choice heavier than ever. What would she say? And what would happen when the world learned the full story of Raina, Maddox, and the children caught between them? Raina's thumb hovered over the phone, the screen's glow casting shadows across her small apartment. Trent Holloway's business card lay on the table, its stark white edges a silent threat. His words, "Walk away or I'll make sure everyone knows," echoed, chilling her. Delilah's rumors had already cost her job, her stability, and now Trent was circling, ready to use her to wound Maddox. She clutched Eli closer, his soft warmth steadying her racing heart. Jonah slept in the next room, unaware of the storm closing in. Calling Maddox meant risking the fragile life she'd built, but silence meant letting Trent's threat fester. The ocean murmured outside, but it offered no answers. She pressed the call button, her breath catching as the line rang. Maddox answered on the second ring, his voice taut with hope and fear. "Raina?" The sound of her name in his low, familiar tone stirred memories she'd tried to bury. His gentle touch, his quiet laughter. But she pushed them aside, her voice steady, despite the knot in her chest. "We need to talk. Now I'm in trouble, Maddox, and it's because of you." She kept it brief, telling him about Trent's visit, his thinly veiled threat, and the rumors Delilah had spread, now rippling through her small town. "They fired me from the daycare. People think I'm after your money. And this man, Trent, he knows about Eli. He's coming for you, and I'm in the middle." Maddox's silence was heavy, a storm gathering. "Where are you?" he asked, his tone sharp, controlled, but laced with something darker. "I'm coming to you, right now." Raina hesitated, the instinct to keep her sanctuary secret warring with the reality of Trent's threat. But she gave him the address, her voice firm. "Just you, no one else. I don't want your world following you here." "I'll be there in 2 hours," he said, and the line went dead. Raina set the phone down, her hands trembling. She'd opened the door to Maddox again, but what would it cost her? 2 hours later, headlights cut through the darkness outside her apartment. Raina watched from the window as Maddox stepped out of a sleek black car, alone, his suit rumpled from the drive. She opened the door before he could knock, Eli asleep in her arms, the quiet of the night amplifying every sound. Maddox's gray eyes locked onto hers, a mix of relief and fury flickering across his face. He stepped inside, his presence filling the small space, and for a moment neither spoke. "Tell me everything," he said, his voice low but edged with anger. Not at her, but at the situation, at Trent, at himself. Raina recounted Trent's visit, his cold smile, his threat to expose her and Eli. She told him about Delilah's rumors, the whispers that had followed her from the coffee shop to the gala to her town, costing her job and her peace. Her voice stayed steady, but her eyes betrayed the weight of it all. Maddox's hands clenched into fists, his jaw tight as he paced the small room. "Trent Holloway," he growled, the name a curse. "He's been gunning for me for years, but this, going after you, my son." His voice rose, then broke, his anger giving way to something raw. He stopped, turning to her, his eyes blazing. "I should have been here. I should have stopped this before it started." Raina adjusted Eli, her own anger flaring. "You couldn't have known. But this is what I was afraid of, Maddox. Your world, it doesn't just hurt you, it hurts us." She gestured to Eli, to the apartment, to the life she'd fought for. I ran to keep my boys safe, and now they're in the crosshairs because of who you are. His face crumpled, guilt etching deeper lines. He stepped closer, his voice dropping to a fierce whisper. I know I messed up, Raina. Hiding who I was, letting you face this alone. I'll carry that forever. But I'm here now, and I'm not letting you go again. He reached out, then stopped, his hand hovering as if afraid she'd pull away. I don't care what they think. Trent, Delilah, the whole damn city. You and Eli, Jonah. You're mine, my family, and I'll burn everything down before I let anyone hurt you. The words hit her like a wave, warm and heavy, stirring the part of her that still ached for him. His anger had softened into something gentle, a promise wrapped in resolve. She wanted to believe him, to let his certainty anchor her, but fear held her back. You say that, she said, her voice quiet but firm, but how do I know? Your world is power, money, people like Trent who play games with lives. I can't raise my boys in that. Maddox's eyes searched hers, steady and unyielding. Then we make our own world, away from them. I'll step back, scale down, whatever it takes. I've built empires, Raina, but none of it means anything if I lose you again. He glanced at Eli, his voice softening further. He's my son. Jonah's my family now, too. Let me prove I can be the man they need, the man you need. Raina's throat tightened, torn between his words and the scars of betrayal. She thought of Trent's threat, Delilah's rumors, the job she'd lost. Maddox's promise was a lifeline, but it came with risks, his wealth, his enemies, the spotlight that followed him. Yet, as she looked at him, standing in her cramped apartment, his suit out of place but his sincerity undeniable, she felt a flicker of hope. Could he really protect them? Could they build something real, away from the chaos? She shifted Eli, her voice barely above a whisper. I don't know if I can trust you yet. But Trent, he's not stopping, and I can't fight him alone. She met his gaze, her resolve hardening. If you're serious, you deal with him. Keep him away from us. Then maybe, we can talk about what comes next. Maddox nodded, his expression fierce but tender. I'll handle Trent. He won't touch you, I swear it. He stepped closer, his hand brushing her arm, a touch both tentative and grounding. I'm not asking for everything, Raina. Just a chance. For us. For them. The moment stretched, heavy with possibility. Raina didn't pull away, but she didn't lean in either. The ocean whispered outside, and Eli stirred, a reminder of what was at stake. Trent's threat loomed, Delilah's rumors still burned, but Maddox's promise was a spark in the dark. Could she let him in? And what would happen when Trent struck again? Raina stood in the dim light of her apartment, Maddox's touch lingering on her arm, his promise, I'll handle Trent, hanging in the air like a fragile thread. His gray eyes held hers, fierce yet tender, and for the first time in a year she didn't look away. The weight of his words, his vow to protect her and her sons, stirred something deep. A flicker of trust she hadn't dared to feel since she'd learned who he was. Eli slept against her chest, oblivious to the moment, while the ocean's soft murmur outside seemed to urge her forward. She'd agreed to let Maddox try, to face Trent and prove he could shield them from his world. But the question remained. Could she let him back into hers? Maddox's hand fell to his side, his voice soft but resolute. I'll go now, start dealing with this. But I'm coming back, Raina, as soon as it's safe. He glanced at Eli, a quiet awe in his expression, then back at her. Thank you for giving me a chance. She nodded, her throat tight. Just be careful. Trent's not playing games. Her words were a warning, but also a plea. She wasn't ready to lose him again, even if she couldn't admit it yet. He stepped toward the door, then paused, turning back. I meant what I said. You're my family. I'll do whatever it takes. With that, he was gone, the door clicking shut, leaving Raina in the quiet with her thoughts and her son's. She sank onto the couch, Eli's warmth grounding her, but her mind raced. Maddox's promise was a start, but Trent's threat loomed, and Delilah's rumors still stung. Trust was a slow rebuild, and she wasn't there yet. But as she rocked Eli, she felt a shift, a crack in the walls she'd built. Days passed, tense and quiet. Maddox called daily, brief updates on his efforts to neutralize Trent, legal maneuvers, private investigators, quiet pressure on Trent's allies. He kept his distance, respecting her need for space, but each call ended with the same gentle insistence. "I'm here, Raina. Whenever you're ready." She listened, her heart softening with each word, though fear held her back. What if Trent retaliated? What if Maddox's world swallowed them? Then, one evening, a knock came, soft but sure. Raina opened the door to find Maddox, his suit traded for a simple sweater and jeans, his face weary but warm. "It's done," he said, stepping inside. "Trent's backing off. I've got leverage. Documents, deals he doesn't want exposed. He won't come near you or the boys." He held up a hand, preempting her doubt. "It's not perfect, but it's enough for now. You're safe." Raina exhaled, relief mingling with disbelief. "Just like that?" Her voice was skeptical, but her shoulders eased, the weight of Trent's threat lifting slightly. Maddox's lips curved, a tired smile. "Not just like that. Took some doing, but you're worth it." He glanced at Eli, asleep in a bassinet, and Jonah, playing with blocks on the floor. "They're worth it." She studied him, the man who'd once hidden his truth but now stood bare, no secrets left. The air between them shifted, charged with possibility. She wanted to hold back, to protect herself, but the pull was stronger. "Stay," she said, the word slipping out before she could stop it. "Just for tonight. The boys. They should know you." His eyes widened, a flicker of hope breaking through. "You sure?" She nodded, her voice soft. "I'm sure." The evening unfolded slowly, a delicate dance of rebuilding. Raina cooked a simple meal, pasta, a salad, while Maddox sat on the floor with Jonah, stacking blocks into wobbly towers. Jonah giggled as Maddox made exaggerated faces, toppling the blocks with a dramatic flourish. Raina watched from the kitchen, her heart catching at the sight. Maddox, the CEO who commanded boardrooms, was just a man here, clumsy with joy, learning his son's world. At dinner they talked, tentative at first. Raina shared stories of Jonah's first words, Eli's sleepless nights, the small victories of her life alone. Maddox listened, his eyes never leaving her, drinking in every word. He spoke, too, of the blackout that had kept him from her, the regret that haunted him, the quiet moments he'd imagined this life. "I saw you in every room I walked into," he said, his voice low, "even when I didn't know where you were." Her eyes stung, and she looked away, stirring her pasta. "I was so angry," she admitted. "When I found out who you were, it felt like everything we had was a lie. But I missed you, even when I didn't want to." He reached across the table, his hand hovering near hers, waiting. She met his gaze, then let her fingers brush his, a small surrender. The touch was electric, familiar yet new, and it broke something open in her. They cleared the dishes in silence, the air heavy with unspoken need, trust teetering on the edge of renewal. Later, with Jonah and Eli tucked into bed, Raina and Maddox sat on the couch, the room lit only by a single lamp. The ocean's whisper filtered through the window, a soft backdrop to their closeness. She leaned against him, her head on his shoulder, the warmth of his body a quiet anchor. "I was scared," she said, her voice barely audible. "Of you. Of what loving you could mean. For me. For them." Maddox turned, his hand cupping her cheek, his thumb tracing her skin. "I know," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I messed up, Raina. But I'm here now and I'm not going anywhere. You don't have to be scared alone." Her breath hitched and she tilted her face up, their lips meeting in a kiss that was both tender and fierce. It was a reclamation, a bridge across the year they'd lost. His hands moved to her waist, pulling her closer, but there was no rush, only reverence. She felt the heat of him, the steady beat of his heart under her palm, and it was like coming home. The kiss deepened, passionate but respectful, each touch a question, each response an answer. She pulled back, her forehead against his, tears slipping down her cheeks. "I thought I'd lost you," she whispered, her voice breaking. "When I couldn't reach you, I thought that was it. I had to keep going for them." He wiped her tears, his own eyes glistening. "You didn't lose me. I was lost without you." He kissed her again, softer now, then pulled her into his arms, holding her as if she might vanish. They stayed like that, wrapped in each other, the weight of their past easing with every breath. As the night deepened, they talked, laughed, cried. Raina told him about the coastal town, the way the sea calmed her, the dreams she still held for a community center. Maddox shared the loneliness of his world, the way her laugh had been the first real thing he'd felt in years. They spoke of Eli, of Jonah, of the future they might build. "I want to be their dad," he said, his voice raw. "Not just in name, in every way that matters." She nodded, her hand in his. "We'll figure it out, together." The word felt new, fragile, but right. When words gave way to silence, they moved to her bedroom, the intimacy of the moment unfolding with care. Their touches were slow, deliberate, a dance of rediscovery. His fingers traced the curve of her shoulder, her hands mapped the lines of his chest, each moment rebuilding trust. It was sensual, yes, but more than that. It was emotional, a promise sealed in whispers and warmth. They fell asleep, tangled together, her head on his chest, his arms around her, the ocean's rhythm lulling them into peace. In the early hours, Jonah's soft cry woke them. Maddox stirred first, slipping from the bed with a quiet, "I've got him." Raina watched, her heart swelling, as he lifted Jonah from his crib, murmuring soothing words. He settled on the couch, Jonah curled against his chest, the boy's small hand clutching his shirt. Maddox's eyes met hers, a silent vow in the dim light. He slept there, Jonah in his arms, a father claiming his place. Raina lay awake, watching them, tears and hope mingling. The night had rekindled something she'd thought lost, but the world outside waited. Trent's lingering shadow, Delilah's rumors, the city's watchful eyes. Could they hold on to this, or would the storm break them again? The questions lingered, but for now, she held tight to the man and the boys who were her heart, trusting in the promise they'd begun to rebuild. The dawn light filtered through Raina's apartment, casting soft shadows over Maddox and Jonah, asleep on the couch. Jonah's small form was nestled against Maddox's chest, his tiny hand gripping the edge of Maddox's sweater. Raina stood in the doorway, her heart a tangle of warmth and worry. The night had been a revelation, a rekindling of trust, a passionate reunion that left her feeling both anchored and vulnerable. Maddox's promise to be there, to build a life with her and her sons, had cracked open a hope she'd long buried. But the world beyond her coastal haven loomed. Trent's threat, though subdued, wasn't gone, and Delilah's rumors still poisoned the air. As she watched Maddox stir, his eyes fluttering open to meet hers, she wondered if their fragile new beginning could withstand what was coming. Maddox smiled, careful not to wake Jonah. "Morning," he whispered, his voice rough with sleep but warm. He shifted, cradling Jonah gently, and Raina felt a pang of something she hadn't allowed herself in years, faith in a shared future. She crossed the room, brushing a hand over Jonah's curls, then Maddox's cheek. "You're good with him," she said, her voice soft. He doesn't usually sleep so easy with anyone else. Maddox's smile deepened, but his eyes held a quiet resolve. I want to be good for both of them. For you. He paused, his gaze searching. I know it's not simple, Raina. Trent, the rumors. I'll keep fighting to keep them away. But I need you to know I'm all in. She nodded, her throat tight. I know. I'm trying to believe it. The words were honest, a bridge between her fear and her hope. They spent the morning together, Maddox helping with breakfast while Jonah babbled and Eli cooed from his high chair. It was ordinary, yet profound, a glimpse of the life they could have. But as Maddox prepared to return to the city to finalize his efforts against Trent, a shadow lingered. Raina felt it, a prickle of unease she couldn't shake. Weeks later, that unease became a storm. Raina was at home, folding laundry while Jonah played and Eli napped when a sharp knock startled her. She opened the door to a courier who handed her a thick envelope with her name in stark black ink. Her stomach dropped as she tore it open, scanning the legal jargon. A lawsuit. Trent Holloway was suing her for defamation, claiming she'd spread lies about his business practices to damage his reputation. The accusations were false, a twisted fabrication, but the summons was real, demanding her appearance in court. The room spun, and she gripped the counter, her mind racing. Trent hadn't backed off. He'd found another way to strike. She called Maddox, her voice trembling as she read him the document. He's saying I accused him of fraud, Maddox. I never said anything like that. This is a lie, but it's in court. I can't afford a lawyer. I can't... Her words broke, panic rising. Maddox's voice was steady, a lifeline. Raina, listen to me. This is Trent playing dirty, but he won't win. I'm handling it. I've got the best lawyers, and I'm coming to you. Don't sign anything, don't talk to anyone. I'll be there tonight. His calm anchored her, but the fear didn't fade. A lawsuit wasn't just a threat, it was a public attack. One that could drag her and her sons into the spotlight she'd fought to escape. That evening, Maddox arrived, his face set with determination. He pulled her into his arms, holding her tightly as she let the tears come. He's trying to scare you, he said, his voice low but fierce. But he doesn't know who he's up against. I've got evidence, records of his shady deals, witnesses who'll talk. He's overplayed his hand. He cupped her face, his eyes blazing. You're not fighting this alone. Raina clung to his words, but the weight of the lawsuit pressed down. The court date was set for a month later, and the days that followed were a blur of preparation. Maddox's legal team descended, briefing her on strategy, but the stress gnawed at her. Delilah's rumors had resurfaced, amplified by the lawsuit, with tabloids painting Raina as a scheming opportunist. Her coastal town, once a refuge, buzzed with whispers again, and she kept Jonah and Eli close, shielding them from curious stares. Maddox stayed by her side, splitting his time between the city and her apartment, his presence a steady comfort. He played with Jonah, rocked Eli, and held her through sleepless nights, each moment rebuilding the trust they'd lost. The night before the court date, Raina sat on her couch, Maddox beside her. Jonah was asleep in his room, Eli in a bassinet nearby. She stared at the legal papers, her hands trembling. What if we lose? She whispered. What if they believe him? I can't let this touch my boys. Maddox took her hand, his grip firm. We won't lose. Trent's case is built on lies, and we've got the truth. But even if the worst happens, I'm here. I'm not letting you face this alone. He pulled her close, his lips brushing her forehead. You're stronger than he knows, and I love you for it. Her breath caught, the words sinking deep. She leaned into him, their kiss soft but fierce, a reminder of the night they'd rekindled their bond. I love you too, she said, the admission both terrifying and freeing. They held each other, the promise of their future stronger than the fear of tomorrow. The courtroom was a cold, imposing space, its high ceilings and polished wood amplifying every sound. Raina sat at the defendant's table, her heart pounding as Trent's lawyer spun a tale of her supposed lies, painting her as a vindictive woman out to ruin a powerful man. Trent sat across the room, his smirk barely concealed, his eyes glinting with confidence. The judge, a stern woman with sharp eyes, listened impassively, and Raina felt exposed, the weight of the city's gaze pressing down. Her lawyer, a formidable woman hired by Maddox, countered with calm precision, dismantling Trent's claims. But the outcome was uncertain, the tension thick. Raina's hands twisted in her lap, her mind racing. She'd faced judgment before, in the coffee shop, the gala, her town. But this was different. This was her life, her son's future, laid bare in a room of strangers. She glanced at the gallery, expecting only reporters and curious onlookers, but then the doors opened and her breath caught. Maddox walked in, holding Jonah in his arms. Jonah's curls bounced as he clung to Maddox, his small face bright with trust. Maddox's suit was impeccable, but his expression was raw, defiant as he met Raina's eyes. He moved to the front row, settling Jonah on his lap, and leaned forward, his voice clear and steady. "She's not alone." The room stilled, whispers rippling through the gallery. Trent's smirk faltered, his eyes narrowing as Maddox's presence shifted the air. The judge raised an eyebrow, but Maddox didn't flinch. His gaze locked on Raina, a silent vow. Jonah babbled softly, oblivious to the stakes, and Raina's heart swelled, tears pricking her eyes. Maddox hadn't just shown up. He'd brought their son, claiming their family in front of the world. Her lawyer seized the moment, calling Maddox to the stand as a character witness. He handed Jonah to a trusted aide, then took the oath, his voice calm but powerful. He spoke of Raina's integrity, her strength as a mother, her independence. "She never asked for anything from me," he said, his eyes on her. "Not money, not fame. She built a life for her sons, despite every obstacle. Trent Holloway's claims are a lie, a desperate attempt to hurt her and me, because he can't compete fairly." Trent's lawyer objected, but the judge allowed it, her expression unreadable. Maddox continued, detailing Trent's history of underhanded tactics, his threats against Raina, and the evidence his team had gathered. "He came to her home," Maddox said, his voice hardening. "Threatened her and our son. This lawsuit is retaliation, nothing more." The gallery buzzed, reporters scribbling furiously. Raina watched, her fear easing as Maddox's words built a shield around her. He stepped down, returning to Jonah, who reached for him with a grin. The image of them together, father and son, unashamed, burned into her, a strength she hadn't known she needed. The trial stretched on, but Maddox's testimony shifted the tide. Trent's case crumbled under scrutiny, his lies exposed by documents and witnesses Maddox's team had secured. By the end, the judge's ruling was swift. The defamation claim was dismissed, Trent ordered to pay Raina's legal fees. The gavel fell, and Raina exhaled, relief flooding her. Trent stormed out, his face a mask of fury, but she didn't care. She was free. Maddox met her outside the courtroom, Jonah still in her arms. He pulled her into a hug, Jonah sandwiched between them, giggling. "It's over," Maddox said, his voice thick with emotion. "You're safe now." She nodded, tears falling as she held them both. The city buzzed around them, but for the first time, it didn't feel like a threat. Maddox had stood by her, not just in words but in action, claiming their family in the face of the world. The road ahead wasn't clear. Delilah's rumors lingered, and Trent's defeat might not be final, but with Maddox and Jonah beside her, Raina felt ready to face it. Their love, hard-won and fiercely rebuilt, was a promise stronger than any storm. The courthouse steps were cold under Raina's feet, but the warmth of Maddox's arm around her and Jonah's giggles between them grounded her. The judge's ruling, Trent's defamation lawsuit dismissed, still echoed in her mind, a weight lifted after weeks of dread. Maddox's testimony, his bold entrance with Jonah in his arms, and his unwavering declaration, "She's not alone," had turned the tide, exposing Trent's lies and shielding her from his wrath. The city buzzed around them, reporters lingering at a distance, but for the first time Raina didn't feel exposed. She looked at Maddox, his gray eyes soft yet fierce, and Jonah clinging to his father's jacket, and felt a quiet strength. They'd faced the storm together, and they'd won. Maddox adjusted Jonah, his smile tired but genuine. "Let's get out of here," he said, his voice low, meant just for her. "Somewhere quiet. Just us." Raina nodded, her heart full but wary. The victory was real, but Delilah's rumors still simmered, and Trent's defeat didn't guarantee his silence. She glanced at the reporters, their cameras glinting, and tightened her grip on Maddox's hand. "Somewhere far from them," she said, nodding toward the crowd. He chuckled, a sound that eased her tension. "I know a place. Trust me." He led her to his car, the driver opening the door as Jonah babbled happily. They drove out of the city, leaving the skyscrapers behind, the coastal town's familiar salty air welcoming them as they neared her apartment. But Maddox didn't stop there. He directed the driver to a secluded beach nearby, a stretch of sand framed by dunes and the endless ocean. The sun was setting, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink, and the quiet was a balm after the courtroom's intensity. They stepped onto the sand, Jonah toddling ahead, chasing the edge of the waves with gleeful squeals. Maddox carried Eli, who'd been brought by Raina's neighbor, his tiny form nestled against his father's chest. Raina watched them, her sons and the man who'd claimed them, and felt a pang of gratitude mixed with lingering fear. "This feels too good," she said, her voice soft as she stood beside Maddox. "Like it's going to break." He turned to her, his free hand finding hers. "It won't break," he said, his voice steady. "Not if we hold on. I know it's been hard, Raina. Trent, the rumors, me messing up before, but we're here now. Together." He squeezed her hand, his eyes searching hers. "I'm not letting go." She leaned into him, her head against his shoulder, Eli's soft breaths between them. "I want to believe that," she said, her voice thick. "I'm trying." He kissed her forehead, a gentle promise. "That's enough for now. We've got time." They stood there, watching Jonah play, the waves a soothing rhythm, and for a moment the world felt small, just them and the love they were rebuilding. That evening, back at Raina's apartment, the quiet intimacy of their family continued to unfold. Jonah was sprawled on the living room floor, coloring with crayons, while Eli dozed in a bassinet. Raina and Maddox sat at the kitchen table, a pot of tea between them, the steam curling in the soft light. The lawsuit was behind them, but Raina's mind still churned with questions. How would they navigate Maddox's world? Could they keep their son safe from its reach? And what did a future together really look like? Maddox seemed to sense her thoughts. He reached into his jacket, pulling out a slim folder, his expression a mix of nerves and resolve. "There's something I need to show you," he said, sliding the folder across the table. "I was going to wait, but after today, it feels right." Raina's brow furrowed as she opened it, her eyes scanning the document inside. It was a legal agreement, dense with terms, but the title stood out. Trust Fund for Jonah Emanuel Carter. Her breath caught, her fingers tightening on the paper. The fund was substantial, millions set aside for Jonah's education, health care, and future, with provisions for Eli to be added once formalities were complete. The date on the document was weeks ago, before the courtroom, before she'd even agreed to let Maddox back into her life. She looked up, her voice unsteady. You did this? When? Maddox leaned forward, his hands clasped, his gaze unwavering. A few weeks after the gala, when I saw you again. When I knew Eli was mine and Jonah. I didn't know him yet, not really. But my soul did. His voice softened, thick with emotion. I couldn't stop thinking about him, about both of them. I wanted to make sure they'd be okay, no matter what happened between us. Even if you never let me back in, I needed to know they'd have everything they need. Raina's eyes stung, the weight of his words sinking deep. You didn't even know if I'd talk to you again, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. And I still loved you, he said simply. I loved them. I didn't need to know the future to know that. He reached for her hand, his touch gentle but firm. This isn't about money, Raina. It's about showing you I'm here, for good. For them, for you, for us. She stared at the document, her mind reeling. The trust fund was more than financial security. It was a commitment made in silence when she'd been too afraid to trust him. It was proof, tangible and undeniable, that Maddox had chosen her sons before he'd even held them. Tears slipped down her cheeks, and she didn't wipe them away. I don't know what to say, she admitted, her voice breaking. It's everything. Maddox stood, moving to her side, and knelt beside her chair, his hand cupping her face. You don't have to say anything. Just let me be here. Let me love you and our boys. That's all I want. His thumb brushed her tears, his eyes searching hers, and she saw the man who'd walked into the courtroom with Jonah, who'd faced Trent's lies, who'd held her through the night they'd rekindled their bond. She leaned into his touch, her hand covering his. I'm scared, she said, honest and raw. Not of you, but of what comes next. The world out there, it's still waiting to judge us. He nodded, his expression fierce but tender. Let it try. I've got you. We've got each other. He pulled her into his arms and she sank into him, the folder still open on the table, a symbol of his quiet devotion. They held each other, the tea growing cold, Jonah's crayons scattered, Eli's soft snores a gentle rhythm. The moment was theirs, a sanctuary carved from the chaos. Later, they tucked Jonah into bed, Maddox reading him a story about a brave little boat, his voice low and soothing. Jonah's eyes drooped, his small hand clutching Maddox's finger, and Raina watched from the doorway, her heart full. When Jonah was asleep, they checked on Eli, his tiny chest rising and falling, and Maddox's hand found hers, a silent vow. They returned to the living room, sitting close on the couch, the trust fund papers now tucked away but ever present in Raina's mind. She turned to him, her voice soft. When you first told me about Eli, I didn't know if I could let you in. I'd been alone so long, it felt safer. But this, she gestured vaguely, encompassing the night, the document, their family. This makes me believe we can do this. Maddox's smile was small, almost shy. We can. It won't be easy. People like Delilah, Trent, they'll always be out there. But we're stronger than them. He pulled her closer, his lips brushing her temple. I knew it the night we met, when you spilled coffee on me and didn't back down. You're my home, Raina. You and the boys. She laughed through tears, the memory of that night at the art gallery vivid. I thought you'd fire me on the spot. Never, he said, his voice warm. I was already falling for you. He kissed her, slow and deep, a promise sealed in the quiet of her apartment. The kiss held the weight of their past, the hope of their future, and the love that had survived it all. They stayed there, wrapped in each other, talking late into the night, about Jonah's love for boats, Eli's first smile, the community center Raina still dreamed of. Each word wove them closer, a family not just in name but in truth. As the moon rose, they fell asleep on the couch, Raina curled against Maddox, his arm around her. The ocean whispered outside, a reminder of the world beyond, but for now it was just them. The trust fund was proof of Maddox's love, a quiet act that spoke louder than any headline. But the world wasn't done with them. Delilah's rumors still lingered, and Trent's silence might not last. Could their love hold against the next storm? For now, Raina held tight to the man beside her, trusting in the proof he'd given and the future they'd fight for together. The morning sun filtered through Raina's apartment, casting a warm glow over the couch where she and Maddox had fallen asleep, tangled in each other's arms. The trust fund papers, a testament to Maddox's quiet devotion, sat on the table, their weight grounding her in a hope she'd scarcely dared to embrace. Jonah's soft laughter drifted from his room, where he played with his toy boats, and Eli's gentle coos came from the bassinet. Maddox stirred, his gray eyes meeting hers, a smile tugging at his lips. "Good morning," he murmured, his voice rough with sleep, his hand brushing her cheek. The night had woven them closer, their shared dreams for their sons and their rekindled love a fragile but fierce bond. But the world outside their haven was never far, and Raina felt a prickle of unease, as if the peace they'd found was too delicate to last. Maddox kissed her forehead, then stood to check on Jonah, his ease with their son a quiet joy. Raina watched, her heart full but wary. The courtroom victory over Trent had silenced one threat, but Delilah's rumors still simmered, and the city's eyes lingered. As she rose to make coffee, a sharp knock at the door shattered the morning's calm. Her stomach twisted. She wasn't expecting anyone. Maddox glanced at her, his expression shifting to alert concern. "Stay here," he said, moving toward the door, but Raina followed, her instincts on edge. She opened the door to a face she hadn't seen in years. Derek, her ex, standing tall and lean, his dark eyes cold with purpose. His presence was a jolt, dragging her back to a past she'd buried, a relationship marked by broken promises and abandonment. He'd left when she was pregnant with Jonah, never looking back, and now he stood here, uninvited, in her sanctuary. "Raina," he said, his voice smooth but laced with something sharp. "We need to talk about my son." Her blood ran cold, her hand gripping the doorframe. "You have no son here," she said, her voice low, fierce. "You left, Derek. You don't get to walk back in." Maddox stepped beside her, his presence a wall, Jonah now in his arms. "Who are you?" he demanded, his tone calm but edged with steel, his eyes narrowing as he sized Derek up. Derek's gaze flicked to Maddox, then Jonah, a smirk curling his lips. "I'm Jonah's father, and I'm here to claim what's mine." His words were a blade, cutting through the fragile peace of the morning. Raina's heart pounded, her mind racing. Jonah was hers, raised alone through sleepless nights and scraped together meals. Derek had no claim, no right, but his confidence unnerved her. "You're not his father," Raina said, her voice trembling with fury. "You walked out before he was born. Maddox is his father now, in every way that matters." She glanced at Maddox, who nodded, his jaw tight, Jonah clinging to him, sensing the tension. Derek's smirk didn't waver. "That's not what the law says. I've got rights, Raina, and I'm not leaving without him." He pulled out a folded document, thrusting it toward her. "My lawyer's already on it. We'll do a DNA test if we have to, but Jonah's mine." Raina took the paper, her hands shaking as she scanned it. A petition for paternity and custody, filed days ago. The air seemed to thin, her breath shallow. A DNA test would confirm what she already knew. Derek was Jonah's biological father, but biology didn't make a parent, and the thought of him dragging Jonah into a courtroom, tearing apart the family she'd built, was unbearable. "You can't do this," she said, her voice breaking. "You didn't want him. You never did." Derek shrugged, his eyes glinting with malice. "Things change. I heard you're with some rich guy now. He nodded at Maddox. Figured it's time I got what's owed me. Jonah's my ticket. His words confirmed her fear. This wasn't about love, but leverage, a chance to exploit Maddox's wealth or hurt her for moving on. Maddox stepped forward, his voice low, dangerous. You're not taking our son. Not now, not ever. You want a fight? You'll get one, but you won't like the outcome. Jonah whimpered and Maddox softened, rubbing his back, but his eyes stayed locked on Derek, unyielding. Derek laughed, unfazed. See you in court, then. DNA doesn't lie. He turned, strolling away, leaving the document in Raina's trembling hands. She slammed the door, her breath ragged, and sank against it, the paper crumpling in her grip. Maddox set Jonah down, letting him toddle to his toys, then pulled Raina into his arms, his strength steadying her. He can't take him, she whispered, tears spilling. Jonah's ours. He's yours. Maddox cupped her face, his eyes fierce. He won't. I swear it. We'll fight this, Raina. My lawyers, my resources, they're yours. Derek's got nothing but greed, and that won't hold up. He kissed her, a fierce promise, but the fear lingered. A DNA test would prove Derek's claim, and while custody wasn't guaranteed, the battle would be public, painful, exposing Jonah to a world she'd fought to shield him from. They sat, the document on the table, Jonah's laughter a stark contrast to the storm brewing. Maddox called his legal team, outlining the situation, his voice calm but commanding. Raina watched, her mind spiraling. Not the word you hate, but a frantic whirl. Derek's return was a ghost from her past, threatening the future she and Maddox were building. The trust fund, the courtroom victory, their rekindled love. It all felt fragile now, vulnerable to a man who'd abandoned her, but now saw profit in her son. Maddox ended the call, turning to her. We'll bury him in court. He's got no case, no history with Jonah, but we need to be ready for the test. His voice softened, his hand finding hers. We'll get through this. Together. Raina nodded, but the weight of Derek's claim pressed down. The city's eyes, Delilah's rumors, Trent's lingering shadow. Now this. Could their love withstand another fight? She looked at Jonah, then Eli, and felt a fierce resolve. She'd protect her sons, with Maddox or alone. But as she met his gaze, his love unwavering, she chose to lean in, trusting the man who'd claimed her family as his own. What would you do if an ex came back trying to claim your child? Let me know in the comments. Raina clung to Maddox's hand, her heart pounding as Derek's parting words, DNA doesn't lie, echoed in her mind. The crumpled paternity petition lay on the table, a stark reminder of the battle ahead. Jonah played nearby, oblivious to the threat his biological father posed, while Eli slept in his bassinet, the quiet of the coastal apartment a fragile shield against the storm. Maddox's promise to fight, backed by his legal team and unwavering resolve, anchored her, but fear gnawed at her. A DNA test would confirm Derek's claim to Jonah, and though custody wasn't guaranteed, the public spectacle could tear apart the family she and Maddox had fought to build. She looked at Maddox, his gray eyes fierce with love, and drew strength from his presence, even as the shadow of her past loomed. Maddox pulled her close, his voice steady. We'll handle this, Raina. Derek's got no ground to stand on, legally or morally. We'll protect Jonah. He kissed her forehead, then stepped away to make another call to his lawyers, his tone commanding as he outlined the need for a swift, private DNA test to preempt Derek's move. Raina watched, her mind racing. The trust fund, the courtroom victory over Trent, their rekindled love. It all felt at risk, vulnerable to a man who'd abandoned her, but now saw Jonah as a pawn. The next morning, the reality of Derek's claim settled in. Raina's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Court dates set. Be ready. Her stomach churned, the message unmistakably from Derek or his lawyer. She showed it to Maddox, who cursed under his breath, his jaw tight. He's trying to rattle you, he said, his hand on her shoulder. We're one step ahead. My team's already filed for an expedited test, and we'll keep this out of the headlines. His confidence was a lifeline, but Raina couldn't shake the dread of seeing Derek in court, his smirk haunting her. The DNA test was arranged discreetly, conducted at a private clinic to avoid prying eyes. Raina held Jonah as the technician swabbed his cheek, her heart aching at his innocent confusion. It's just a little tickle, baby, she murmured, kissing his curls. Maddox stood beside her, his hand on her back, his own swab taken to establish his role as Eli's father and, symbolically, Jonah's. The technician promised results within days, and Raina left the clinic feeling exposed, the weight of the unknown pressing down. Days passed in a tense blur. Maddox stayed with Raina, splitting his time between her apartment and phone calls to his legal team, ensuring every angle was covered. He played with Jonah, read to Eli, and held Raina through restless nights, his presence a quiet strength. But the wait for the results was agonizing, each day stretching her nerves thinner. Delilah's rumors still circulated, whispers of Raina's gold-digging past resurfacing in tabloids, and Raina feared Derek's claim would fuel the fire, painting her as a liar or worse. The morning of the results, Raina woke to find Maddox already up, making coffee, Jonah perched on his hip. Whatever happens, he said, meeting her eyes, we're a family. No test changes that. His words were a vow, but her hands trembled as she nodded, the fear of losing Jonah to Derek's greed a constant ache. A courier arrived by noon, delivering a sealed envelope from the clinic. Raina's breath caught as Maddox opened it, his expression unreadable as he scanned the document. She braced herself, expecting the worst, Derek's biological claim confirmed, a courtroom battle looming. But Maddox's face broke into a stunned, radiant smile, his eyes glistening as he handed her the paper. Read it, he said, his voice thick with emotion. Raina's hands shook as she read the results. Maddox Kane, not Derek, was Jonah's biological father. The words blurred through her tears, her mind reeling. How? She whispered, looking up at Maddox, who was now kneeling beside her, Jonah in his arms. I don't know, he said, his voice raw. But it's true. Jonah's mine. Always was. He pulled her into a hug, Jonah giggling between them, oblivious to the miracle. Raina's mind flashed back to the night she'd met Maddox, the art gallery, the spilled coffee. Had it been then? The timeline was hazy, her memory clouded by Derek's abandonment, but the test was clear. Maddox was Jonah's father, in biology and in heart. The revelation shifted everything. Raina's fear of Derek's claim dissolved, replaced by a fierce joy. She kissed Maddox, then Jonah, tears streaming. You're ours, she said, her voice breaking. Both of you. Maddox's lawyers moved quickly, presenting the results to the court. Derek's petition was dismissed before it could gain traction, the DNA test a definitive blow. When confronted with the evidence, Derek vanished, his lawyer withdrawing the case, his greed defeated by a truth he hadn't anticipated. Raina heard nothing more from him, his shadow retreating as swiftly as it had appeared. The tabloids, starved of drama, turned to other stories, and Delilah's rumors faded, unable to compete with the quiet power of the truth. That evening, Raina and Maddox sat on the beach near her apartment, Jonah chasing waves, Eli asleep in a carrier. The sunset painted the sky in gold, the ocean's rhythm a soothing backdrop. Raina leaned against Maddox, her hand in his, the weight of the past weeks lifting. I thought I'd lose him, she admitted, her voice soft. But you were right. We're stronger than them. Maddox kissed her, his lips warm against hers. "We always will be," he said, his eyes on Jonah. Then her. "You, me, our boys. Nothing's breaking us." The words were a promise sealed by the test that had rewritten their story. The world might still watch, but Raina no longer feared its gaze. With Maddox and her sons, she'd found a love that no threat could touch. The sunset's golden glow lingered on the beach as Raina leaned against Maddox, Jonah's laughter mingling with the ocean's soft rhythm. The DNA results, confirming Maddox as Jonah's father, had shattered Derek's claim and cemented their family in a way Raina hadn't dared hope. Eli slept in his carrier, and Maddox's hand in hers felt like a promise stronger than any storm. The weight of Trent's lawsuit, Delilah's rumors, and Derek's threat had lifted, leaving a quiet joy. But Raina knew the world beyond their coastal haven still watched, its judgments ever ready. As Maddox kissed her temple, whispering, "We're unstoppable now," she believed him. Yet a flicker of caution remained. Their love was proven, but could it withstand the city's spotlight? Maddox sensed her thoughts, his gray eyes searching hers. "You're thinking about what's next," he said, his voice low, warm. "I see it in your eyes." She smiled, a little wry. "Can't help it. We've beaten a lot, but people like Delilah don't just disappear. And your world—" She trailed off, glancing at Jonah, who was now piling sand into a lumpy castle. "It's still waiting." He nodded, his expression resolute. "Let it wait. I've got a plan, something to show everyone who we are. You trust me?" His tone was gentle but firm, a reminder of the trust fund, the courtroom, the nights he'd held her through fear. Raina squeezed his hand. "I do." The words were simple, but they carried the weight of their journey. She didn't know what he planned, but she was ready to face it with him. Weeks later, Raina stood in front of a full-length mirror in a sleek city penthouse, her breath catching at the sight of herself in a deep emerald gown, its fabric shimmering softly. Her caramel skin glowed under the chandelier's light, her hair swept into an elegant updo, a few curls framing her face. Jonah, in a tiny suit, twirled nearby, giggling as Maddox, dashing in a tailored tuxedo, pretended to chase him. Eli was with a trusted sitter, safe for the evening. Tonight was Maddox's firm's annual gala, a high-profile event attended by the city's elite, and he'd insisted she and Jonah come. "It's time they see us," he'd said, his voice carrying a quiet intensity she couldn't refuse. Her stomach fluttered with nerves. The gala meant stepping into the heart of Maddox's world. Cameras, whispers, the same crowd that had judged her in the coffee shop, the courtroom, the tabloids. But Maddox's hand on her lower back steadied her as they stepped into the waiting car. "You're not just my date tonight," he said, his eyes glinting with something she couldn't quite read. "You're my everything." The gala was held in a grand ballroom, its soaring ceilings draped with crystal chandeliers, tables laden with orchids and candlelight. The crowd was a sea of wealth, designers, CEOs, socialites, their laughter polished but sharp. Raina felt their eyes as she entered, Jonah's hand in hers, Maddox at her side. Whispers followed, some curious, others cutting. But she held her head high, Jonah's chatter about his fancy shoes grounding her. Maddox's presence was a shield, his hand never leaving hers, his smile defiant yet warm. Delilah was there, her blonde hair gleaming, her red gown a statement of confidence. She stood with her usual circle, her lips curling as she spotted Raina. "Still playing the Cinderella card," she muttered to a friend, loud enough for Raina to hear. "Wonder how long he'll keep her around." Her friends tittered, but Raina ignored them, focusing on Jonah, who was tugging her toward a table of desserts. Maddox leaned close, his breath warm against her ear. "Ignore her. She's nothing tonight." His tone was calm, but his eyes promised more, a plan unfolding. Raina nodded, trusting him, though her pulse raced at the weight of the room's gaze. The evening progressed with speeches and toasts. Maddox's firm celebrated for another year of dominance. Then, as the orchestra paused, Maddox took the stage, his presence commanding silence. He held a microphone, his gaze sweeping the room before settling on Raina and Jonah, who stood near the front. "Tonight," he began, his voice clear, resonant, "is about more than business. It's about what matters most." Raina's heart skipped, sensing a shift. Maddox extended a hand, beckoning her and Jonah to join him. She hesitated, the crowd's eyes heavy, but Jonah tugged her forward, unafraid. She climbed the steps, Jonah in her arms, and stood beside Maddox, the spotlight warm on her skin. Delilah's smirk faltered, her friends exchanging stunned glances. Maddox turned to Raina, his expression softening. Love laid bare. "This is Raina Carter," he said, his voice carrying to every corner. "The strongest woman I know. She's faced judgment, lies and threats, and she's never backed down. She's the mother of our sons, Jonah and Eli, and she's my heart." He paused, taking her hand, his thumb brushing her knuckles. "And tonight, I'm proud to introduce her as my fiancée." The room gasped, a collective intake of breath. Raina's eyes widened, her breath catching as Maddox dropped to one knee, a small velvet box in his hand. Inside gleamed a simple but stunning ring, diamonds catching the light. "Raina," he said, his voice low but clear, meant for her yet heard by all. "I've loved you since the night you spilled coffee on me. You and our boys are my home. Marry me." Tears spilled down her cheeks, joy and disbelief mingling. The crowd faded, the whispers, Delilah's stunned silence. None of it mattered. She saw only Maddox, the man who'd fought for her, claimed her sons, and stood by her through every storm. "Yes," she whispered, then louder. "Yes." Maddox slid the ring onto her finger, standing to pull her into a kiss, passionate and unapologetic. Jonah clapped, giggling, and the crowd erupted in applause, some genuine, others shocked. Delilah stood frozen, her face pale, her words lost as the room celebrated the woman she'd mocked. Maddox lifted Jonah, kissing his cheek, then kissed Raina again, the stage a declaration of their unbreakable bond. The rest of the night was a blur of congratulations, dances, and Jonah's delighted chatter. Raina moved through it, her hand in Maddox's, the ring a quiet weight on her finger. Delilah slipped away early, her influence diminished, her rumors drowned by the truth of Maddox's love. The city would talk, but Raina no longer feared its voice. With Maddox and Jonah beside her, she was home. Would you still love someone if the world mocked them? Let's talk about real love in the comments. The gala's glow lingered as Raina, Maddox, and Jonah stepped into the cool night, the city's hum softened by the weight of the ring on her finger. Maddox's public declaration, introducing her as his fiancée, kissing her on stage, had silenced Delilah and stunned the elite crowd, cementing their love in the face of judgment. Jonah clung to Maddox's hand, his tiny suit rumpled, his eyes bright with the evening's excitement. Raina's emerald gown shimmered under the streetlights, but it was Maddox's arm around her, his quiet, "I love you," whispered against her hair, that anchored her. The world had mocked her, from the coffee shop to the courtroom, but tonight they'd rewritten the story. Yet, as they drove back to the coastal town, Raina felt a new question stirring. What would their future hold now that they'd claimed it so boldly? Maddox glanced at her, sensing her thoughts. "You're quiet," he said, his voice low, Jonah dozing in the back seat. "Everything okay?" She smiled, her hand finding his. "More than okay, just thinking about what's next. Us, the boys, this." She touched the ring, its diamonds catching the dashboard's glow. I want it to be ours, not just a moment for the world to see. He nodded, his expression soft but resolute. It will be. We'll build it together. Whatever you want, Raina. A home, a life, your dreams. I'm in. His words echoed the trust fund, the courtroom, the nights he'd proven his love, and she believed him. The road ahead stretched toward their coastal haven, where Eli waited, and Raina felt ready to shape their future, step by step. Months later, Raina stood in the heart of her coastal town, the salty breeze mingling with the scent of fresh paint and coffee. Before her was her dream made real, an art cafe, its sign reading Carter's canvas in bold, looping letters. The space was warm and inviting, exposed brick walls adorned with local artists' work, cozy tables where patrons could sip lattes and sketch, a corner for kids to create with crayons and clay. Maddox had funded it, his wealth a quiet engine, but Raina ran it independently, every decision hers, from the menu to the rotating gallery. It was a community hub, a nod to the center she'd always envisioned, and it thrived, drawing locals and tourists alike. She moved through the cafe, adjusting a canvas, smiling at a regular who praised her chai. Jonah played in the kids' corner, his laughter bright, while Eli, now crawling, babbled in a high chair nearby. The cafe was her triumph, a testament to her resilience, but it was Maddox's belief in her that had made it possible. He'd stepped back, letting her lead, his support unwavering but never controlling. Their love had grown stronger, rooted in trust, their family a quiet anchor against the world's lingering whispers. That evening, Maddox arrived at the cafe, his suit traded for jeans and a sweater, his gray eyes glinting with a secret. "Close up early," he said, a playful edge to his voice. "I've got a surprise." Raina raised an eyebrow but agreed, locking the door as Jonah tugged at Maddox's hand, chanting, "Da-da!" The word, now a constant from Jonah's lips, warmed her every time, a reminder of the family they'd become. Maddox drove them to the city, to the art gallery where they'd met years ago, its familiar walls now lit with soft golden light. Raina's heart fluttered as they stepped inside, memories flooding back. The spilled coffee, Maddox's warm laugh, the night their story began. The gallery was empty, save for a single painting displayed in the center, a vibrant canvas of a woman and two boys on a beach, the ocean endless behind them. Raina recognized her own features, Jonah's curls, Eli's bright eyes, captured with love. She turned to Maddox, her breath catching. He was on one knee, Jonah beside him, holding a small velvet box. "Raina," Maddox said, his voice steady but thick with emotion, "this is where it started. You changed my life that night and every day since. You're my strength, my home, my love." He opened the box, revealing a ring, not the one from the gala, but a new one, simpler, etched with tiny waves. "I asked you once in front of the world. Now I'm asking just for us. Marry me, Raina. Be my forever." Tears spilled as she knelt too, meeting him at his level, Jonah giggling between them. "Yes," she said, her voice breaking with joy. "Always." Maddox slid the ring onto her finger, its weight a perfect fit, and kissed her, slow and deep, the gallery fading until it was just them. Jonah clapped, babbling, "Dada, Mama!" and they laughed, pulling him into their embrace, a family whole and unbreakable. The painting watched over them, a symbol of their journey, from the coffee shop's mockery to the courtroom's trials, from Derek's threat to the gala's triumph. Delilah's rumors had faded, Trent's shadow gone, the city's judgment no match for their love. Raina looked at Maddox, his arms around her, and Jonah, and knew this was their full circle, a beginning born from every storm they'd weathered. They lingered in the gallery, talking, laughing, Jonah toddling between canvases as Maddox recounted the night they'd met, teasing her about her nervous apologies. "I was already yours," he said, his eyes warm, "spilled coffee and all." Raina smiled, her hand in his, the ring a quiet vow. Their love was no longer a secret or a battle. It was a life built on trust, resilience, and the boys who made it whole. Do you believe everyone deserves a second chance at love? Let's keep this conversation going. Like, comment, subscribe, and join our beautiful story family. Your support helps us spread more stories of hope and heart.